Rise of the European Emperor by Taishang Laonyo.
Chapter 501, Waterway Advancement Plan. Although Marin got the opportunity to draw a line with the emperor and become independent because Frederick III wanted to form a coalition to attack, Marin was not grateful to Frederick III and did not intend to let him go. After all, if Marin himself had no money and insufficient military strength, he might have been killed by Frederick III this time. Therefore, in this war, Marin planned to make the electorate of Saxony bleed well. It is certain that the electorate of Brandenburg will bleed a lot. After all, the elector of Brandenburg has fallen into his hands, and the army of Brandenburg has basically been captured. Therefore, it is difficult for Brandenburg not to be controlled by Marin this time. As for the electorate of Saxony, because Frederick III ran away, Marin did not have many bargaining chips in his hands and could not get too many benefits from Saxony. But this is not a problem, because Marin plans to march into Wittenberg and capture the heir of the elector of Saxony, Frederick III's younger brother John, and John's children. Capturing the other party's heir has the same effect as capturing Frederick III himself. Because Frederick III has no descendants. Capturing John and John's children is equivalent to capturing the next elector of Saxony. At that time, when negotiating, the bargaining chips will be enough. This time, Marin intends to cut a big piece of meat from the electorate of Saxony anyway. The main reason is that Frederick III is too threatening to himself, and he must be taught an unforgettable lesson. Moreover, Marin, who is familiar with history, knows that negotiations are useless just by talking. In the end, strength is the key to success at the negotiating table. Even if the representatives of powerful countries are not good at talking, they can still gain the upper hand with enough confidence given by the powerful countries behind them. The representatives of weak countries, no matter how good their words are, cannot change the fact that their motherland is weak. The ability of negotiators can only be exerted when the strength of both sides is not too different. Of course, the strength of allies is also part of strength. In addition, Marin has read Chinese history and knows that during the Civil War, on the eve of the signing of the Double Ten Agreement, both sides had not stopped military operations. Because whoever has the upper hand on the battlefield will be more confident in negotiations. Therefore, after solving the diplomatic problem, Marin's next step is to send out a large army to break through Wittenberg and arrest John and his children in order to gain the initiative at the negotiating table. To this end, Marin had already sent spies to Wittenberg to monitor members of the Wettin family and prevent them from escaping. If John and others escaped from Wittenberg, then Marin would also change his combat objectives and make the capture of John and others his primary goal. After all, the importance of important members of the Wettin family such as John is a little higher than that of Wittenberg. Of course, Wittenberg must also be captured. Because, as the capital of the wealthy electorate of Saxony, Wittenberg's wealth is relatively objective. To break through Wittenberg, Marin does not need to plunder the entire city. As long as he plunders the Saxon treasury and the mansions of the great nobles and merchants, it will be enough to pay back, and there will be a lot of surplus. After all, the Saxony region is the second largest business district of the Hanseatic League, and the taxes generated are still a lot. The Saxony business district is different from the Wendy business district. The Hanseatic cities in the Wendy business district have strong autonomy, and the taxes are basically controlled by the Hanseatic cities themselves. Although the Hanseatic cities in the Saxony business district are autonomous in name, they are actually secretly controlled by the Saxon princes and have not provided a large amount of taxes to the Saxon princes. Therefore, Saxony has always been one of the most powerful princes in the German region. As long as Wittenberg, the capital of the electorate of Saxony, is conquered, a large amount of gold, silver and other property will be obtained. Although it cannot be compared with the richest cities in the Hanseatic League such as Lübeck and Hamburg, it is definitely much richer than ordinary cities. Wittenberg was called Lutherstadt Wittenberg in later generations. Stadt means city in German. Lutherstadt means city of Luther, and there are also translators who directly translate Lutherstadt into Luther city. The reason why Luther's city was added in front of Wittenberg later was because Martin Luther initiated the Reformation in Wittenberg with the support of Frederick III. Lutheranism has a huge influence on Germany. The electorate of Brandenburg, which is the predecessor of the later Kingdom of Prussia and the German Empire, is a hardcore Lutheran country. Therefore, when Lutheran Prussia unified Germany, Martin Luther became a saint in Germany, and in a vote on German TV 2 in 2005, he ranked second in the Greatest German after Adenauer, the first Prime Minister of West Germany, and ranked higher than Mada Husi. Then, because he was so great, the original Wittenberg was directly changed by the Germans to Luther's city Wittenberg, becoming a holy place for Lutheranism. Of course, Martin Luther has not yet emerged, and Wittenberg is still called Wittenberg. This is a city located on the Elbe River, located in the middle reaches of the Elbe River. The Elbe River is very wide, and even in the middle reaches of the river near Wittenberg, it is still possible to sail. Of course, only medium-sized ships of 100 or 200 tons can sail here. This is mainly because sailboats often need to make Z-shaped movements to move forward, which requires a wider water surface. Only machine-driven ships or paddle boats can move in a straight line. Therefore, in later generations, cargo ships of thousands of tons can run near Wittenberg, but in this era, only small and medium-sized sailboats of 100 or 200 tons can run. Running ships. Marin's eyes lit up while thinking. Before, Marin originally planned to let the army go by land. However, it was too troublesome to go by land. Food needs to be transported by carts, and a large number of militiamen are needed to accompany the army, which is very inconvenient and consumes a lot of food. However, if you go by water, it's different. Because you don't need too many militiamen to transport food and supplies, Marin can bring fewer militiamen. If the 40,000 troops go by land, at least nearly 20,000 militiamen will be needed to transport food and supplies. If we take the Elbe River, there is no need to bring many civilians, a few thousand people will do. Even, because there are sailors on the ship, they can act as civilians. Thinking of this, Marin immediately decided that the army would take the Elbe River and rush to Wittenberg, the capital of the Electorate of Saxony. Then, land near Wittenberg, then surround Wittenberg, break the city and capture John and other core members of the Wettin family alive. However, Marin did not have so many inland ships. Therefore, he could only repeat the old trick: seek help from Hamburg. The Elbe River is the base of Hamburg. The Hanseatic merchants in Hamburg have a lot of say on this river and also have many inland transport ships. Therefore, if Marin wanted to march easily, he had to ask Hamburg for help and ask them to send out ships to help transport the army to Wittenberg. Marin immediately wrote a letter to Heisenberg, the Grand Speaker of Hamburg, asking them to send enough ships and sailors to help transport the 40,000 troops, as well as a large amount of food and supplies, as well as artillery and ammunition. Marin was not worried that the Hamburg people would refuse, because the Hamburg people also hoped that Marin would win. Moreover, after conquering the rich Wittenberg, Marin promised to share the property obtained with Lübeck and Hamburg. In this way, the possibility of Hamburg's refusal was even lower. Then, Marin made various preparations and pulled the army and food supplies to the port on the west coast, ready to board the ship. As soon as the Hamburg fleet arrived, they could directly pull it on board and head towards Wittenberg. Chapter 502, A Plan to Seize Shipping Talents. Sure enough, Hamburg was very supportive of Marin's military action. After all, the people of Hamburg also resented the previous behavior of Frederick III, the Elector of Saxony, who wanted to destroy Lübeck and Hamburg. As the deputy leader of the Hanseatic League, Hamburg was actually not very happy with the Saxon business circle, the second echelon of the Hanseatic League. The Hanseatic cities in other business circles would more or less give face to the two leaders of Lübeck and Hamburg. The Saxon business circle, however, did not take Lübeck and Hamburg seriously because it was under the secret control of the Wettin family. After all, they had the most distinguished elector behind them, so they naturally would not take the Hanseatic merchants in Lübeck and Hamburg seriously. Therefore, the people of Hamburg also hoped that Marin could severely damage the electorate of Saxony in this military operation, and it would be best if the business there was destroyed. In this way, the Saxons would be honest. Otherwise, the Saxons, the second largest Hanseatic business circle, always wanted to compete with Lübeck and Hamburg in the Wendy business circle for the position of the boss. As the deputy leader of the Hanseatic League, Hamburg's influence on the German mainland is stronger than Lübeck. Why? The reason why Lübeck can become the most powerful leader is that Lübeck is close to the Baltic Sea and controls a huge share of cheap Eastern European goods and Baltic salt trade. Selling salt in the Baltic Sea and selling cheap Baltic goods such as wood, fur, grain, wine, plant ash, beeswax, livestock, etc. Because of the monopoly of the lucrative Baltic salt trade and the source of cheap Eastern European goods, Lübeck has become the most powerful city in the Hanseatic League. Hamburg, on the other hand, is different from Lübeck. Their trade is more inclined to become a middleman for Germany, spreading the herring in the North Sea, the mineral salt in the Lüneburg area, and the cheap Eastern European goods from Lübeck to many areas in northern Germany through the Elbe River and related rivers with developed shipping. Therefore, Lübeck's base is the Baltic Sea, while Hamburg's base is the Elbe River and the North Sea. Even the importance of the Elbe River to Hamburg is greater than that of the North Sea. Therefore, Hamburg also has a lot of inland merchant ships. Even the total number of its merchant ships is not less than that of Lübeck. However, the tonnage of inland merchant ships cannot be compared with seagoing ships. Moreover, the profits of Hamburg's business activities are not as much as those of monopolizing the salt trade in the Baltic Sea and controlling cheap goods in Eastern Europe. In terms of business scale, Hamburg is not smaller than Lübeck. It's just that the profit is a little lower, so it ranks below Lübeck and becomes the second in the Hanseatic League. Of course, Hamburg controls the trade in the lower reaches of the Elbe River, but the middle reaches are the territory of the Saxon business circle. This time when Marin marched into the electorate of Saxony, the people of Hamburg also hoped that Marin could damage the interests of Saxon Hansa merchants as much as possible, so as to withdraw some of the trade shares on the Elbe River and let the Hamburg merchants take it. Therefore, the Hamburgers proposed that they could provide inland vessels for free to help Marin transport ships. However, after taking down Wittenberg, all the riverside docks in Wittenberg and the ships on the docks should be given to Hamburg. The Elbe River was not Marin's sphere of influence, so Marin would naturally not refuse to give it. Therefore, Marin directly agreed to the Hamburgers' request and stated that when signing the armistice agreement, he would strive to allow Hamburg merchants to obtain the right to operate normally in the Saxony business circle. In addition, Marin would not only help Hamburg merchants capture the riverside merchant ships of the electorate of Saxony, but also help them take the sailors of the electorate of Saxony away and give them to Hamburg. If the ship is gone, it can be bought, but if the skilled sailors are gone, it will take a long time to train them. Once this move is made, the shipping industry of the electorate of Saxony will definitely be affected for several years. After receiving this reply from Marin, Heisenberg and other Hamburg parliamentarians jumped for joy. Hamburg had only thought of plundering the inland merchant ships of the electorate of Saxony, but had not thought of kidnapping the captains and sailors of Saxony's inland merchant ships. If there were no merchant ships, they could be hired as long as they had money. But without sailors, it would be difficult. After all, skilled inland shipping sailors are treasures everywhere and will not be poached casually. Moreover, in this era, sailors are still strictly controlled by their employers and have no right to change jobs or leave at will. If there were really no sailors, the Saxons could only train them slowly by themselves, unlike in later generations, where they could be poached as long as they spent money. After all, although the status of sailors in this era was higher than that of serfs, they were only treated similarly to servants and had no ability to decide their own destiny. As long as the employer disagrees, others can forget about poaching. Sailors who sail are actually better. Because it is relatively easier to control a sailboat when sailing on the sea. After all, the sea is so wide that the direction of the sailboat is easy to control. However, inland navigation of sailboats is much more complicated. The requirements for sailors are also higher. Because the inland river is narrow, and the sailboat often needs to do Z movement to move forward. But the inland river is not wide, and when doing this kind of movement, it is necessary to control the sail to prevent the ship from hitting the river bank or even running aground on the river beach. Therefore, it is more difficult to control an inland sailboat than to control a sailboat at sea. When encountering some too narrow rivers, the ship will lower the sails and paddle to avoid the ship running aground. Therefore, skilled inland sailboat sailors are more difficult than seafaring sailors. Marin proposed to rob all the merchant sailors of the electorate of Saxony, which was a heavy blow to the inland trade of the electorate of Saxony, and it was very deadly to the core. For Hamburg, this not only hit the inland trade competitors on the Elbe River, but also took advantage of the opportunity when the opponent reduced the trade share to seize more markets. Therefore, the Hamburg Parliament made a direct decision to suspend the inland trade on the Elbe River and pull all the inland merchant ships over to ship Marin's army. In addition, Hamburg will also send 2,000 troops south. The mission of these 2,000 Hamburg troops is to capture as many sailors of the inland merchant ships of the electorate of Saxony, including those skilled captains and first mates, as possible back to Hamburg to weaken competitors. Marin is also happy that the Hamburg people do it themselves, so that the Hamburg people can also help him share some of the hatred of the Saxons. Although the Hanseatic merchants of Saxon merchant ships do not rely solely on inland shipping. However, inland shipping has low costs, much lower than land shipping, and a large cargo volume, which is definitely the preferred method of transportation for Hanseatic merchants in the Saxon business circle. The Hamburg people snatched away Saxony's inland shipping talents, which will definitely have a great impact on the trade of the electorate of Saxony in a few years. Marin is very happy to see things that make Frederick III uncomfortable. Although the Saxon business circle is not only Hanseatic merchants from the electorate of Saxony, but also Hanseatic merchants from the Duchy of Saxony. However, when the Treaty of Leipzig was split, Ernst's branch was the first to choose, and it must have chosen the lower reaches of the Elbe River, relative to the Duchy of Saxony, which is more suitable for inland trade. Therefore, the commercial activities on the side of the electorate of Saxony are more prosperous. Moreover, because they did not provide enough support to Duke George before, but sent the main force of the country to help Denmark fight, Frederick III and George actually had a big gap. This time, after the Hamburgers robbed the shipping talents of the electorate of Saxony, it is estimated that Duke George will not support the shipping business of the electorate of Saxony too much. Because the two sides are already in harmony. Not only that, Marin also intends to further provoke the two branches of the Wettin family. For example, Marin intends to call on the imperial parliament to deprive Frederick III of the title of elector and give it to George. Although this call is almost the same as saying it. However, it will sow resentment and cracks between the two branches of the Wettin family. There was already a rift between the two branches because of the Danish issue, and with Marin's further instigation, it is estimated that the two sides will become even more alienated. Chapter 503 The Emperor sends out his troops. Just after Marin and the Hanseatic city of Hamburg reached an agreement to borrow a ship, Marin and his army were still waiting for the ship sent by Hamburg at the seaport west of the Duchy of Schleswig. At the same time, in the Swiss region, Emperor Maximilian I, in accordance with Marin's advice, gathered tens of thousands of troops and marched to the Aargau region in a mighty manner. Generally speaking, in order to ensure the safety of Austria and Burgundy, the Habsburg family set up a standing army of 16,500 people, all of whom were mercenaries who were good at fighting. But since occupying the Graubünden region at the suggestion of Marin, in order to guard against the counterattack of the Swiss, Emperor Maximilian I increased the standing army from 16,500 to more than 20,000, reaching as many as 25,000. Therefore, for the Habsburg family, the dispatch of 10,000 people this time was not considered to be all out. But this was enough. Because at this time, there were fewer soldiers in Switzerland. However, this time, the emperor's troops did not attack from the Graubünden region in the southeast of Switzerland, but from the county of Burgundy, which is the northwest of Switzerland. Because the terrain of the Graubünden region is complex, if you want to send troops from the Graubünden region, you must first lead the army through the most powerful canton of Zurich in Switzerland, and then reach the canton of Aargau in the north. This time, although almost the entire Swiss army went out. However, the canton of Zurich still left some troops to guard. Although there were only 2,000 or 3,000 people, it was not enough to openly confront the emperor's troops. However, relying on the complex mountain terrain and strong fortresses, it was still possible to stop the emperor's army. Moreover, Maximilian I's army could not afford to delay. Although Marin detained 18,000 Swiss mercenaries, there were more than 10,000 Swiss mercenaries in France and the Duchy of Geddes. Once Maximilian I's army was held up by 2,000 or 3,000 defenders in Zurich, and the troops of France and the Duchy of Geddes came back, it would be hard to say who would win. Therefore, Maximilian I decided to attack from the Burgundy county in the northwest of Switzerland, that is, the Franche-Comté region of France in later generations. Because the Aargau canton is located in the north of Switzerland, with the canton of Zurich to the east and the bishopric of Basel to the west. Moreover, the terrain of Switzerland is high in the south and low in the north. Although the north is not a plain, the terrain is much gentler. Sending troops from the Burgundy county also avoided crossing mountains and ridges as much as possible. Originally in history, the Basel City Council abolished the bishop's governance in 1501 and chose to join the Swiss alliance. However, that happened when Maximilian I participated in the Swabian War in 1499 and was defeated by Switzerland. Due to Marin's interference, Maximilian I did not rashly participate in the Swabian War, nor did he lose. Therefore, the bishopric of Basel still exists, and it is still a religious vassal of the Holy Roman Empire, and it does not belong to the Swiss alliance. Therefore, when Maximilian I's 10,000 troops entered the bishopric of Basel from the county of Burgundy, they were not blocked. Because the bishop of Basel is also somewhat close to the empire and does not like the Swiss. However, the citizens of the Basel area are very close to the Swiss alliance. However, because Switzerland has never defeated the emperor, the citizens of Basel do not have the confidence to depose the bishop of Basel and throw themselves into the arms of Switzerland. The most important thing is that Switzerland is now empty, and the emperor's army is unstoppable at this time. In normal times, if Maximilian I only sent 10,000 troops to enter Switzerland, he would definitely be beaten into a dog. However, the timing is too good now. Switzerland has more than 30,000 mercenaries, but most of them are outside, and Switzerland itself is very empty. Therefore, although Maximilian I only sent 10,000 troops, he still swaggered through the Basel area and entered the canton of Aargau, the place where the Habsburg family made its fortune. The canton of Aargau had no way to deal with this, because at this time, there were only 300 or 400 old, weak and disabled people in the canton of Aargau, and they were no match for the Habsburg family army at all. In normal times, the canton of Aargau could also ask for help from Zurich, the most powerful big brother of the Swiss alliance in the east, and ask Zurich to send troops to rescue. However, Zurich only had 2,000 or 3,000 second-line troops at this time, which was considered old and weak among the Swiss mercenaries. These people, relying on the strong fortresses in Zurich, might be able to resist the 10,000 troops of Maximilian I. However, coming to rescue Aargau is definitely a suicidal act. After all, Austria has sent 10,000 troops, or elite German mercenaries. And the choice of the chief coach of this 10,000-strong army is also very surprising. Because this person is very young, his name is Frundsberg. Yes, this is Frundsberg, the outstanding officer that Marin gave to Maximilian I, the father of German mercenaries, in history. Originally, Maximilian I did not trust Frundsberg very much. After all, Frundsberg was sent by Marin. The organizational relationship is still with Marin. But later, because of the strong combat effectiveness of Marin's army, although Maximilian I did not directly reuse Frundsberg, he gave Frundsberg the important task of training new recruits after the expansion of the army. So, Frundsberg began to train new recruits seriously according to the Spanish phalanx learned from Marin, so that the new recruits quickly formed combat effectiveness. When guarding the Graubünden area, this well-trained new recruit played a strong combat effectiveness. Relying on the mountainous terrain, it repelled several counterattacks of the Swiss and suppressed several rebellions of local forces in the Graubünden area. Then, Frundsberg became more and more important in the eyes of Maximilian I. Like Marin at the beginning, Maximilian I formally appointed Frundsberg as the phalanx leader of the new army, mainly managing the two phalanxes sent by Marin. But Frundsberg's talent shows that he is competent even if he commands several phalanxes. After all, in terms of command talent, Frundsberg's talent exceeds that of Schwarz, Marin's #1 general. It's just that Frundsberg's loyalty to the emperor and patriotism is too serious, and he actually prefers Emperor Maximilian I in his heart. In the end, Marin chose to cultivate Schwarz, who was more loyal to himself, and kicked Frundsberg to the emperor's side, and brought two phalanxes of soldiers and horses, which was also an explanation to Maximilian I. Just some time ago, there was news that Marin publicly drew a line with Maximilian I. Maximilian I, who always valued Frundsberg, felt that the opportunity had come. What opportunity? Of course, it was to test Frundsberg's loyalty. Although on the surface, Frundsberg was very loyal to Emperor Maximilian I, in fact, it was true, as an emperor, Maximilian I was not so easy to trust others. Therefore, Maximilian I deliberately did not tell Frundsberg the real reason, but deliberately said that Marin really wanted to draw a line with him. He didn't know that Marin really thought so. Then, His Majesty the Emperor gave Frundsberg a chance to choose, return to East Frisia or stay. If Frundsberg chose to return to East Frisia, then there was nothing to say. Although Maximilian I felt sorry for his departure, he could not give up. After all, an unfaithful subordinate left and left. If Frundsberg chose to stay, it would show that Frundsberg was a talent worthy of promotion and training by Maximilian I. From now on, Maximilian I can reuse him with confidence. After all, Maximilian I's top general, Count Frederick II of Hohenzollern of the Swabian family, was not young anymore, and his military talent was average, not as good as Frundsberg. Frundsberg didn't know that this was a test from Maximilian I, and thought that Marin and Maximilian I had really parted ways. After thinking painfully all night, Frundsberg, with dark circles under his eyes, told Emperor Maximilian I the next day that he was willing to stay. Moreover, Frundsberg also wrote an apology letter, hoping that the emperor could send someone to help deliver it to Marin. Maximilian I was overjoyed. After being sure that Marin had not sent anyone to contact Frundsberg recently, His Majesty the Emperor made the decision to reuse Frundsberg. Therefore, to everyone's surprise and shock, Maximilian I appointed Frundsberg as the acting corps commander, commanding 10,000 troops to attack the canton of Aargau from the direction of the county of Burgundy, in order to recapture the ancestral land and the birthplace of the Habsburg family, fulfilling the long-cherished wish of several generations of the Habsburg family. Chapter 504, Siege of Wittenberg. Marin naturally had his own spies on the emperor's side. There were many intelligence officers in the two phalanxes led by Frundsberg stationed in Graubünden. The process in which Frundsberg finally chose to serve the emperor after a complex ideological struggle was naturally noticed by the intelligence officers, and was quietly delivered to Marin through the post system and horse relay. Marin was very painful for such information. In any case, Frundsberg was the first famous historical celebrity recruited by Marin, earlier than Leonardo da Vinci and Machiavelli. Moreover, in the early days, Marin even thought about replacing Schwarz's position and becoming the commander of the army second only to Marin himself. However, Marin later discovered that Frundsberg seemed to have a great liking for the Habsburg family. The Swabian League, where his father served, was also a supporter of Maximilian I. Marin had also tried to probe, and it happened that Maximilian I hoped that Marin would send troops to support his actions in the south, mainly in Switzerland. So Marin simply asked Frundsberg if he was willing to lead his troops south to support His Majesty the Emperor. Unexpectedly, Franzberg was very active. In desperation, Marin had to let him lead 2 phalanxes south to serve the emperor. And the position of the second person in the army, Marin finally gave it to the more loyal Schwartz. Of course, although Franzberg went south with 2 phalanxes to serve the emperor. However, his organizational relationship is still in the East Frisian county. In name, Franzberg served His Majesty the Emperor on behalf of Marin. And Marin also placed some hope on Franzberg, hoping that he would eventually come back. After all, no one dislikes having many talents under his command. You see those novels that travel through the 3 kingdoms, which one of them didn't pack up all the counselors and generals and take them away? However, this time, taking advantage of the good opportunity of Marin's public announcement of a clear line with the emperor, Maximilian I cunningly asked Franzberg to choose a team. As a result, Franzberg finally chose Maximilian I, which made Marin very sad. In fact, in Marin's heart, Maximilian I had no ambition for a long time. Who made him brazenly say that he wanted to unify all of Germany when he was young. From then on, Maximilian I became the tacit enemy of the princes. From then on, no matter how talented Maximilian I was, it was difficult to display his talents. If Maximilian I wanted to expand, he had to ask the princes whether they agreed or not. Marin was different. Before, he followed Maximilian I as a horseman, and naturally he was constrained in diplomacy. But this time, after being forced to announce a clear line with the emperor, he untied the shackles in his heart, and the sky was free to fly from then on. But Franzberg couldn't see this. Although Franzberg is very talented, it is only in the military field. In politics, Franzberg is still a little bit behind. Moreover, the traditional knight's loyalty and patriotism are also very important in Franzberg's heart. After all, Franzberg comes from a knight family. Therefore, in Franzberg's heart, he is more inclined to the emperor who has a name and righteousness. Moreover, Maximilian I is also very capable, and he is more resourceful and can win people over. If he hadn't committed suicide when he was young and expressed his desire to unify Germany, he wouldn't be so unlucky now. It can be said that Maximilian I spent the rest of his life paying for his arrogant words when he was young. However, Maximilian I's means and personal charm are very strong, which deeply attracted Franzberg, who had been with the emperor for a long time. So, after a fierce ideological struggle, Franzberg abandoned Marin, who cultivated him, and chose to serve His Majesty the Emperor. In Franzberg's heart, he actually agreed with the centralized system of France. He believed that since Marin was also a minister of His Majesty the Emperor, it was reasonable for him, as a minister of a minister, to serve His Majesty the Emperor. Marin was very unhappy about Franzberg's betrayal, but he didn't do anything. After all, Franzberg had followed him for a long time and knew a lot of his secrets. In particular, the secret of increasing grain production. Although Franzberg didn't know the details, he certainly knew that feces was an important fertilizer. If Franzberg revealed this secret to the emperor, it would be terrible. Therefore, although he was very unhappy, Marin wrote a letter to appease Franzberg and expressed his support for his decision. Moreover, Marin emphasized that he was also forced by the princes to publicly announce that he had drawn a clear line with the emperor. Franzberg's service to His Majesty the Emperor was equivalent to his own service to His Majesty the Emperor. After all, Franzberg was brought out by Marin. The 2 most elite phalanxes in his 10,000-man army were also sent by Marin. In addition, Marin also said in his heart that Franzberg's baronial title and manor fiefdom in East Frisia would continue to be retained. However, at the end of the letter, Marin hoped that Franzberg could keep the secret of the fertilizer. Franzberg was still a man with a conscience. After all, a loyal and patriotic person could not be bad. Franzberg felt very guilty for abandoning Marin and choosing the emperor. Marin asked him to keep the secret of the fertilizer, and Franzberg naturally agreed and swore. Marin was naturally very satisfied with this. Moreover, Marin also planned to take good care of the manor that Franzberg left in East Frisia in the future, so that Franzberg would remember his kindness. Seeing that Franzberg would become a popular person in front of the emperor in the future, it would always be right to have a good relationship with him. Although Marin was unwilling to be the emperor's henchman now, the power of the emperor's faction was not weak. Maybe one day, Marin will need their help to achieve his goal. Therefore, there is nothing wrong with having a good relationship with Maximilian I. Not long after Marin received the letter from Franzberg, the fleet from Hamburg rushed to the station of Marin's army Tenning at the mouth of the Ida River. In fact, at this time, Tenning had not yet established a town and a port, and it was just a small fishing village. However, Marin was very optimistic about this small fishing village. Because Tenning is located at the western end of a big river, incomparable to the rivers in China, in the south of the Principality of Schleswig. Moreover, Tenning is a trumpet-shaped estuary bay to the southwest, but it has a certain contraction where it connects to the sea. In this way, this side constitutes a very good sheltered harbor. Although the water depth here is not enough, it will not be possible to dock a 10,000-ton cargo ship in the future. However, this era is different. In this era, because the ships are generally small in tonnage, few of them exceed 500 tons. Then, the harbor at the estuary of a large river like Tunning becomes very good. Moreover, because it is the estuary of a freshwater river, ships can dock here without being afraid of shipworms gnawing at the bottom of the ship. Therefore, this place is very suitable as the port at the southwest end of the Duchy of Schleswig, and it is a safe harbor. Therefore, Marin sent people to build a large number of long-bridged docks in the small fishing village of Tunning, and planned to build a small town on the spot after the war, develop it into a commercial port, and become an important dock for the Duchy of Schleswig to contact East Frisia. Moreover, Marin also plans to build a military port here to dock some warships to ensure the safety of shipping in the North Sea. Because a large number of long-bridged docks were built in advance, when the ships from Hamburg arrived, Marin immediately organized the soldiers to move all the food supplies, artillery ammunition, etc. onto the ship. Then, everyone lined up to board the ship, including Marin. Hamburg is only 250 kilometers away from Wittenberg. In a few days, the mighty fleet came to the city of Wittenberg through the wide Elbe River. After the fleet arrived, Marin immediately arranged for some elite troops to land and control all the shipping docks in Wittenberg to prevent the Saxons from sabotaging. Then, he sent the cavalry ashore first and asked them to patrol near Wittenberg to prevent John and his children from escaping in the chaos. Finally, Marin took most of his subordinates and took their time to use the shipping docks in Wittenberg to land in batches, surrounded Wittenberg, and set up a large camp. Chapter 505 Propaganda War. After besieging Wittenberg, the first thing Marin did was to call in the spies who had been sent to monitor Wittenberg before, and asked Frederick III's younger brother John and John's children whether they had escaped from Wittenberg. The result was very satisfactory to Marin. Perhaps John trusted his brother Frederick III's political skills too much, so John did not escape, nor did he let his children run away. Of course, John now has only one son, John Frederick, who is only 2 years old, and it is difficult to run away. Such a young child, who is exhausted by the saddle horse, may die. Moreover, when Frederick III left Wittenberg, Wittenberg also needed someone to stay in charge. John used to play such a role. His brother Frederick III went out for activities, and he stayed at home. In fact, he might not be able to do anything. However, he sat there like a Buddha statue, which gave people a sense of security that the country has a master. To some extent, John is the mascot of the electorate of Saxony. According to intelligence, because the main force of Saxony was captured by Marin, there are only 3,000 regular army infantry and 8,000 militiamen recruited from all over the country in Wittenberg, and the combat effectiveness is not strong. However, because the electorate of Saxony is financially strong, the walls of Wittenberg have been built tall and solid. With 3,000 regular troops and 8,000 militiamen stationed, it would be difficult for Marin to take it down in a short time if he attacked by force. But Marin was not in a hurry to attack, because many of his soldiers were uncomfortable after several days of sailing. In particular, many German mercenaries were seasick and vomited. Fortunately, Marin prepared a lot of ginger, cut it into slices, and let the seasick soldiers hold it in their mouths to relieve the discomfort. Speaking of which, the 10,000 English mercenaries are worthy of being from a maritime country, and basically no one is seasick. Among the German mercenaries, only the Frisians did not suffer from seasickness. Many of the soldiers from the southern mountains were seasick. And few of the soldiers in Alsace were seasick. Because Alsace is on the Rhine River, many people have taken boats on the Rhine and are more accustomed to inland boat navigation. Fortunately, Marin had prepared in advance and transported a large amount of ginger from the country. Now, Granada is rich in ginger, and ginger is transported to the country by ship. Coincidentally, before Marin went to war, Granada brought back another ship of ginger, which was directly requisitioned as war materials. Looking at many German veterans from the southern mountains who vomited a lot, Marin could only rest for a few days before letting them go to war. However, the soldiers rested, but Marin did not rest. Frederick III was still in Worms, bewitching the princes, so Marin decided to send people to Worms to publicly despise and ridicule Frederick III, and accuse him of deceiving the princes and helping him fight for himself. Of course, it was not the purpose to confront Frederick III. Marin's real purpose was to reveal to the princes the ugly face of Frederick III, who wanted to use everyone to help him fight. However, Marin thought that those princes might not be willing to see the representatives he sent. If you want to create a sensation, you must make it known. Therefore, Marin thought of a very simple propaganda method: posting notices and distributing leaflets. As long as you post notices everywhere in Worms to expose the ugly face of Frederick III, it won't take long for it to spread throughout the city. Even if the nobles themselves did not go to see the posted notices, their followers were literate and could see what was written on the notices. As long as their followers read the notices, they would definitely go back and tell their masters. In addition, Marin was also prepared for someone to not see the notices and for Frederick III to send people to tear down the notices. Therefore, Marin planned to send 300 cavalrymen to Worms to protect the notices, even at the cost of conflict with the Saxons. The act of handing out leaflets is to prevent the notice from being torn off and no one can see it. After all, there are many nobles who are on good terms with Frederick III. 300 cavalrymen may be able to stop the men brought by Frederick III, but it is difficult to stop the sum of the men under Frederick III and his friends. Therefore, handing out leaflets is a supplementary means in the case that the notice is torn off. Marin plans to print tens of thousands of copies and let his men hand them out to people dressed in gorgeous clothes. These days, paper is very valuable. In addition to Marin's papermaking base on Cape Breton Island, where the cost of papermaking is low, the price of paper in other countries is very high. Giving such a large piece of paper to the other party is equivalent to giving money. Apart from other things, the blank space on the back of the leaflet can be used for writing and drawing. As for whether the owner of Worms, Archbishop Mainz, allows posting notices and handing out leaflets in the city of Worms, this is too easy. Marin only needs to send someone to meet Archbishop Mainz and reveal his relationship with the Pope to him. Of course, the secret that Marin is the Pope's son-in-law will not be told, and it will only be told to those who can tell it. Religious princes are different from those secular princes. Secular princes may ignore the Holy See when they are arrogant. But religious princes are different. As long as they annoy the Pope, an excommunication can make the religious princes finished. Excommunication means excommunication. You have been expelled from the church. Can you still stay in the position of archbishop? The other bishops of the bishops will be happy to overturn you. This is why those religious princes choose to wait and see and are unwilling to join the anti-Marin coalition. Of course, Marin will not let the Archbishop of Mainz approve it in vain. It just so happens that Kohler is in Worms and is busy bribing those secular princes. Marin decided to let Kohler take out 20,000 gold coins and send them to the Archbishop of Mainz. Anyway, the 400,000 gold coins from Lübeck and Hamburg have been sent, and Kohler is not short of money now. Even in this propaganda war, Marin also intends to let Kohler play the leading role. Because Marin has no other suitable candidates for the time being. Mikkel, Geoffrey, Hayter and others are suitable for this position, but they are all civil servants, and it takes a long carriage to get to Worms. At present, Marin is surrounded by military officers, who are not suitable for this job. However, this matter is urgent, and he can't wait for those civil servants to get to Worms. Therefore, Kohler, who is in Worms, has become the most suitable candidate. After all, Kohler is also a civil official, at least more eloquent than those military officers. Moreover, Kohler has a baron title, and he will not be seen by others or even refuse to see those princes when he visits them. Moreover, Kohler is currently bribing those princes. Therefore, it is best to let Kohler publicize Frederick III's sinister intention to use everyone to help him achieve his private goals while bribing. Then, as long as the Archbishop of Mainz agrees, Kohler can leave the posting of notices and the distribution of leaflets to those cavalry. In addition, he can also pay to hire local gangsters to do this. As long as they pay, and with the tacit approval of the ruler, the Archbishop of Mainz, there will be many people willing to distribute flyers. I believe that after this wave of posting notices and distributing flyers, there will definitely be many princes who will wake up and are unwilling to be pawns of Frederick III. Only those who are truly Frederick III's die-hard followers will continue to follow Frederick III. However, these people are insignificant, and Marin doesn't take them seriously at all. As long as they dare to come, Marin is sure to beat them to a pulp. What Marin wants is that those princes who are not Frederick III's die-hard followers will not be deceived by Frederick III. And these people account for the majority of secular princes. If they don't come, Marin won't be beaten up. Well, to make up for last night. Chapter 506, Powerful Pope's Decree. While Marin was busy calculating Frederick III, Pope Julius II, who was far away in Rome, was not idle either. He had received a secret letter from Archbishop Hermann IV of Cologne a long time ago, and naturally knew what was happening in Germany. At first, Julius II was furious and felt that Frederick III was too bastard. Therefore, Julius II initially wanted to use the severe measure of excommunication to punish Frederick III. However, after calming down, Julius II gave up this idea. After all, he had only been pope for a short time. Moreover, Frederick III was also a leader among the German electors. Using excommunication on others right away would certainly finish Frederick III off. However, it would not have a good impact on himself. In any case, the dispute between Marin and Frederick III was a struggle for hegemony among the princes within Germany. As a pope, it would not be good for him to excommunicate people just because Frederick III targeted his son-in-law Marin. Moreover, there were opposition within the Vatican. If he excommunicated Frederick III without any reason, the opposition within the Vatican would be very strong. Of course, that was aimed at secular princes, but Julius II would be easier to deal with those religious princes. Because, no matter which bishop or abbot in the German region, they were nominally subordinates of the Vatican. Although Julius II could not excommunicate his subordinates at every turn, it was still easy to issue an edict to reprimand them. The bishop of a bishop state also wanted to save face. If he was reprimanded several times by the Pope's edict, he would lose all his face. Moreover, if he repeatedly confronted the Pope, who was his superior, the Pope could use this as an excuse to excommunicate him. The end of the archbishop who was excommunicated by the Pope was bound to be miserable. When secular princes were excommunicated, at most they would be boycotted by others, and no one would be willing to serve them, and they would be almost deserted by their relatives and friends. As long as no one took the opportunity to send troops to destroy the country, the excommunicated secular princes would still be his nobles. Because secular nobles are determined by blood and have nothing to do with religion. The archbishops of the bishop states were different. The prerequisite for them to become the heads of the bishop states was to be a priest. Because it was a religious country, it was impossible for non-religious people to be the chief ministers. If they were excommunicated by the Pope, the only outcome would be to abdicate and get out. Therefore, secular princes might confront the Holy See, but religious princes would never dare to do so. After thinking again and again, Julius II decided to issue an edict to inform the German princes, announcing that Marin was a loyal supporter of the Holy See and an outstanding noble believer. The bishops and abbots were not allowed to send troops to him without the permission of the Holy See. Otherwise, they would be punished within the Holy See. In serious cases, they could be excommunicated. In addition, all religious princes should not be deceived and instigated by irrelevant people and make irrational actions. When this edict was delivered to Worms, it caused an uproar. This edict almost confirmed that the Pope openly stood on Marin's side. In this way, all religious princes had no possibility of joining the anti-Marin alliance, and Frederick III was immediately embarrassed. What embarrassed Frederick III even more was the last sentence: "Don't be bewitched and instigated by irrelevant people and make irrational actions." Who is this irrelevant person? It is obvious that it refers to Frederick III. At this time, Protestantism had not yet appeared, and the Pope was the highest leader in the spiritual field of Europe. Being implied by the Pope as an irrelevant person greatly damaged Frederick III's prestige. Among the secular princes, in addition to those nobles who had been bribed and had long chosen to oppose the joint military expedition, many nobles who were still hesitant chose to accept Kohler's bribes after learning the content of the Pope's decree, and then no longer joined the anti-Marin alliance. They were just princes and nobles, and they dared not go against the Holy See. When Henry IV was the Holy Roman Emperor, he had to kneel down and beg the Pope for forgiveness after being excommunicated. As ordinary princes, how dare they go against the Pope? So, they saw that the situation was not right and fled decisively. Moreover, before fleeing, they took the opportunity to collect Kohler's money. In the end, it was the remaining dozen nobles, that is, the diehards of Frederick III, who chose to continue to be stubborn and follow Frederick III all the way. After the 300 cavalrymen sent by Marin to Worms arrived in Worms, they handed the contents of the notices and leaflets written by Marin to Kohler. However, before Kohler took action, the wind direction in Worms changed dramatically because of the papal decree of Julius II. Frederick III suddenly became isolated and helpless, and it seemed unnecessary to post notices and distribute leaflets to confront Frederick III. Because, although doing so will achieve certain results, it is also easy to arouse the disgust of many nobles. After all, attacking one of the top nobles in Germany with such a big fanfare will definitely make many nobles dissatisfied. They may not stand on the side of Frederick III, but they must be very dissatisfied with the behavior of attacking a great noble by distributing leaflets. Because this greatly challenged the authority of the nobles. After careful consideration, Kohler believed that since the Pope had already taken action and the victory was already decided, this more drastic method should not be used, so as not to cause a backlash from the nobles. In fact, after sending out the troops, Marin also felt regretful. After all, this is the feudal era. This kind of behavior of posting big character posters to slander a great noble was definitely a violation of the rules in the early 16th century, and it was easy to arouse the disgust of those lawful nobles. So, after thinking through these, Marin sent people to Worms at full speed, wanting Kohler to stop posting notices and handing out leaflets. Unfortunately, Marin sent people a little late. Fortunately, Kohler was cautious and did not implement Marin's plan in time. When Marin's messenger arrived, he was relieved to learn that Kohler did not implement the radical plan. In fact, although Marin cancelled the blatant behavior of posting notices and handing out leaflets, he still planned to spread rumors and the truth by sending people to spread inside information in taverns to attack Frederick III. But after learning that the Pope's decree had settled most of the nobles in Worms, this practice of spreading rumors was directly abandoned. Since the problem has been solved, why risk using those unpresentable methods? The decree of Pope Julius II helped Marin solve a huge problem. At the same time, it also brought great humiliation to Marin's opponent Frederick III, making Frederick III almost a laughingstock. In the Pope's decree, the irrelevant person almost defined Frederick III as a villain who jumps up and down and tries his best to make trouble. This dealt a huge blow to Frederick III's prestige. From that moment on, Frederick III had the idea of going against the Catholic Church in his heart. Although history has changed, Frederick III still had the idea of opposing the Catholic Church. Moreover, it was earlier than in the original history. When Marin sent Martin Luther to Wittenberg later, he quickly hit it off with Frederick III. Then, Martin Luther still became the leader of the Reformation. And Frederick III is still the mastermind and most important supporter behind Martin Luther. It's just that this time is much earlier than the original history. Chapter 507, The Decision of Frederick III. A papal decree crushed Frederick III's plan and greatly damaged his face. Seeing that the coalition against Marin could not be formed, Frederick III had to start considering other things. Seeing that the coalition could not be formed, Frederick III realized that the electorate of Saxony would have to accept the fate of defeat this time, and might be extorted by Marin for ransom or even forced to cede land. Therefore, after the idea of turning defeat into victory was shattered, a very realistic problem was placed in front of Frederick III: how to stop the loss to the greatest extent. The same is ceding land and paying compensation. Ceding a village is ceding, and ceding a county is also ceding. Therefore, what Frederick III has to consider now is how to reduce the area of ceded land and the amount of compensation. But Frederick III understood that because he had tried to form a coalition to eliminate Marin, he had aroused the other party's anger. It is said that Marin has already marched south to besiege Wittenberg. In addition, the other party has the public support of the Pope, so Marin will definitely not let him go easily during the negotiations. The only way to prevent Marin from blackmailing him too harshly is to seek help from the princes. It just so happened that most of the German princes stayed in Worms because of the call of the Archbishop of Mainz. Therefore, Frederick III made a decision to pull down his face and beg those princes to speak for him to avoid being blackmailed too harshly by Marin. As for the reason for asking the princes to speak for him, this is easy to find. It is enough to say that it is to avoid the emergence of overly powerful new princes in Germany. All the princes are vested interest groups. As a vested interest group, what they dislike most is that a new powerful person suddenly emerges and sits on an equal footing with them. Therefore, even if those princes are unwilling to be used by themselves and form a coalition to attack Marin, they must be full of jealousy of the rise and strength of Marin, the newcomer. At the same time, they are also full of worries. Therefore, Frederick III, a brilliant politician, decided to use the jealousy and worries of the princes and borrow their power to put pressure on Marin to reduce his own losses. Among them, the most important thing is to reduce the area of land ceded. Money can be earned again if it is lost, but land can never be earned back if it is lost. The electorate of Saxony is not short of money, but land. After all, Saxony has been divided, and the land of the two Saxon princes is not too much. In total, the land area of the electorate of Saxony is about the same as that of the bishopric of Munster, about 10,000 square kilometers. However, unlike the bishopric of Munster, there are many cities in the electorate of Saxony, about 20 commercial cities, and trade is developed. Therefore, although the land area is much smaller than that of the electorate of Brandenburg, Saxony's economy is far more developed than that of the electorate of Brandenburg. Therefore, Frederick III is not afraid of compensation, but afraid of ceding land. In particular, if the land is ceded, a large number of cities may be ceded away. This is what Frederick III can't stand the most. 3 days later, under the chairmanship of the Archbishop of Mainz, the princes in Worms held a regular meeting. At the regular meeting, Frederick III suddenly stood up and said he had something to say. At first, the princes thought that Frederick III wanted to bring up the old things again and continue to fool everyone to form a coalition with him. So, many people crossed their arms and planned to laugh at Frederick III. But unexpectedly, as soon as Frederick III came up, he bowed deeply to everyone, a deep bow of 90 degrees. All the princes were stunned. You know, Frederick III is one of the 7 electors of the Holy Roman Empire, and he is also an elector with special strength. Usually, Frederick III hardly looks at those small princes. Even if those small princes saluted him, Frederick III just nodded slightly, and snorted in his nose as a greeting. Now, Frederick III's deep bow of 90 degrees shocked many princes. However, religious princes such as the Archbishop of Mainz did not agree with it. They thought, even if you bow a few more times, we will not send troops to help you. However, they were wrong. Frederick III did not come to ask everyone to send troops, but to apologize. My dear colleagues, I am really sorry for everyone. The plan I proposed to form a coalition to attack Marin has caused trouble for everyone. So, I now plan to give up this unrealistic plan. Frederick III's words caused waves of exclamations from the princes. You know, giving up asking for help from everyone is equivalent to giving up hope. And seeing Frederick III's deathly pale look, many nobles couldn't bear it. Archbishop Jacob of Mainz asked reluctantly, Lord Frederick, what are you going to do next? Frederick III sighed helplessly and said, what else can we do? Just sit and wait for our demise. Marin has the support of the Pope and a good relationship with the Emperor. Most importantly, he still has a 40,000-strong army. I think no one in Germany can stop him. So, I can only wait to be destroyed by him. Frederick III's discouraged words startled the princes present. Yes, Marin, when everyone was not paying attention, had already possessed such a powerful strength. The most shocking thing was that this guy actually had the dual support of the Pope and the Emperor. Although Marin had issued a statement before to draw a clear line with the Emperor, everyone knew that he was forced to do so. Looking at everyone's shocked expressions, Frederick III was proud and felt that he still had a chance. However, he quickly put away his pride, revealed a sad expression, and continued, everyone, before, I didn't deceive you, but I made a wrong judgment. I thought that the 20,000 troops that later attacked our camp were reinforcements sent by His Majesty the Emperor. So, I made the wrong judgment that Marin and His Majesty the Emperor were going to join forces to unify Germany. But now it seems that I was wrong. These 40,000 troops turned out to be from that little Count Marin. When I learned the truth, I was almost scared silly. Everyone, who among you can get together 40,000 troops? Not counting the civilians, they are all combat soldiers. The princes present shook their heads. Don't be kidding, let alone 40,000 combat soldiers, even if they counted the civilians, they couldn't get together 40,000 troops. The main reason is that they can't afford the food consumption of 40,000 troops and the wages of the soldiers. That's right, you know. As electors, Joachim and I can only send 15,000 soldiers each. In order to defeat Marin, we hired 20,000 powerful Swiss mercenaries. I think no one in Germany can put together a lineup of 50,000 strong soldiers, right? Everyone nodded and agreed with Frederick III's words. Are you kidding? That's 50,000 strong soldiers, including 20,000 Swiss mercenaries. Even France can't come up with such a lineup. When France was competing for hegemony in Italy and Spain, more than 20,000 of the 40,000 troops were Italian mercenaries who were looked down upon by the Germans. It can be seen how difficult it is to put together 50,000 strong soldiers. But, even with such a strong lineup, we were defeated by Marin. Did you know? Marin has 40,000 troops. 40,000, and that's not just 40,000 troops to make up the numbers, but 40,000 troops with strong combat effectiveness. Frederick III said excitedly. At this time, the princes present realized belatedly that Marin was really powerful. And this is exactly what Frederick III wanted the princes to realize. Sorry, I fell asleep halfway through coding, and even drinking coffee couldn't keep me sleepy. I had to make up for it in the morning. Chapter 508 Gaining Support. After clearing his throat, Frederick III continued, do you know? The 20,000 main forces led by Marin himself did not lose when fighting the Swiss mercenaries on the front battlefield. That day, we were fighting with Marin's 20,000 main forces. In my opinion, 50,000 soldiers will win against 20,000. But who knew that suddenly 20,000 troops rushed out from the side and launched a fierce attack on our army? Among them, 10,000 people dispersed my Saxon army. The other 10,000 people, actually 8,000 people, rushed to the rear of our army. I mobilized the Swiss to resist, but those powerful Swiss mercenaries were quickly defeated. Most of the princes present had never dealt with Swiss mercenaries, and did not know that the Swiss mercenaries were all old, weak and sick. Naturally, they were shocked after hearing this. Of course, even the old, weak and sick Swiss people would have no problem dealing with ordinary German princes' armies. That is to say, the 20,000 troops that rushed over later were also elites with strong combat effectiveness, not conscripts. Frederick III continued. But, tell me, except for that guy Marin, who in the whole of Germany can have 40,000 soldiers with combat effectiveness that is not inferior to Swiss mercenaries? Who has it? The emperor or an elector? Frederick III shouted excitedly. His shout also shook the hearts of all the princes present and caused them to panic. Yes, in the whole of Germany, who can gather a powerful army of 40,000 soldiers whose combat effectiveness is not inferior to that of the Swiss. Suddenly, a chill rose from the soles of the feet of the princes present. Frederick III looked crazy, and he continued excitedly, "Everyone, I'm finished. Saxony, which has been passed down for 650 years, is finished. Including Joachim of Brandenburg, we are finished this time. We two unlucky guys will not only lose our ancestral heritage, but may even go to hell. But we will not be lonely. Everyone here may come back to accompany us soon." "Ha! Lord Frederick, what do you mean?" Frederick III's brother-in-law, Duke Henry of Brunswick-Lüneburg, asked with a frown. In fact, he was a stooge arranged by Frederick III. The two had discussed it in advance and rehearsed the lines. "Henry, perhaps, the first one to accompany me will be you. Do you know? Marin has 40,000 elite soldiers and the support of the Pope. He is about to occupy Brandenburg and Saxony. Think about it, where will his next target be? Is it my territory?" Duke Henry exclaimed deliberately. "That's right. Your territory is right next to Oldenburg and the western part of the Elbe River in the electorate of Brandenburg. Moreover, Lüneburg under your rule is an important salt-producing area, a place that people covet. The other side is so powerful and has the support of the Holy See. Maybe his next goal is to seize your Lüneburg. With Lüneburg, his financial resources will increase greatly. In the future, he may expand his army to more than 50,000 people. At that time, no one in Germany can stop him. Maybe, without joining forces with the Habsburg family, Marin alone can unify Germany." Frederick III chattered like a crazy old woman. However, the princes around him were frightened by the terrible prospects described by Frederick III. But think about it carefully, what Frederick III said is not crazy talk, but it is very likely to become a reality. After all, Marin did have 40,000 soldiers, which was confirmed by many princes. Even if there is an error, it will not be too much. Moreover, they did defeat the 50,000-strong coalition of the Bossa coalition. With such a strong force, no German prince could be a match, not even the Habsburg family. Because the Habsburg family only had about 25,000 soldiers. The average elector had about 10,000 soldiers. Moreover, the combat effectiveness of armies of the same size must also be considered. In this regard, according to Frederick III's description, the combat effectiveness of the East Frisian army may be no less than that of the Swiss mercenaries. If everyone does not join forces, almost no one can fight against Marin's army alone. Frederick III is still there chattering to Thor Duke Henry, "Do you know, Henry? My electorate of Saxony has more than 20 cities, and the Saxon business circle is also the second largest business circle of the Hanseatic League. If my electorate of Saxony is annexed by Marin, then Marin will have enough capital to raise another 20,000 troops. Well, including Brandenburg and your Lüneburg, this guy should have enough capital to raise 70,000 to 80,000 troops, and there will be no problem in dominating Germany. By then, even if the German princes unite, they may not be able to beat Marin. Then, what should we do?" As a qualified supporting role, Henry, Duke of Brunswick-Lüneburg, also performed exceptionally well. Of course, half of his anxiety was pretended, and the other half was really worried. So, he performed so well, without any trace of acting. Unless the German princes unite to limit his gains from this war. In particular, don't let him get too many rich areas. Otherwise, none of us can stop him. Frederick III said in a deep voice. However, after a pause, Frederick III shook his head again and said, "But that is impossible, because with the support of the Pope, those bishops do not have the courage to put pressure on Marin. And the secular princes are not united enough. So, we can only watch Marin become stronger and complete the unification of Germany." At this time, a man stood up from the religious princes. Everyone looked carefully and found that it was Archbishop Ernst II of Magdeburg. Then, everyone understood. Why? Because Archbishop Ernst II of Magdeburg is Frederick III's younger brother. Frederick III's father, Elector Ernst, had a total of 7 children, among whom the eldest daughter Christina is the Queen of Denmark, and the second eldest son Frederick III is the Elector. And the third child is Archbishop Ernst. As for John, he is actually the 5th child of Elector Ernst. He has an older brother named Adalbert. Unfortunately, Prince Adalbert died in 1484 at the age of 17. Otherwise, John would not have inherited the position of the Elector. As for Margaret, the 6th child of Elector Ernst, she is the wife of the Duke of Brunswick-Lüneburg who served as a childminder for Frederick III. In history, the Archbishopate of Magdeburg was the first religious principality to accept Martin Luther's Protestant ideas. Because the Archbishop of the Archbishopate of Magdeburg was Frederick III's younger brother. Although Archbishop Ernst had died when Martin Luther went to Magdeburg, he was succeeded by Albert IV of Brandenburg, who was from the Hohenzollern family, an ally of Saxony. Moreover, the Archbishopate of Magdeburg is right next to the Electorate of Saxony. Therefore, the Archbishopric of Magdeburg easily accepted Martin Luther's preaching, and later became the first religious principality to turn to Protestantism, which had a great impact in the German region. Of course, this was a very bad influence on Catholicism. So much so that during the 30 Years' War, the imperial army representing the Catholic forces, after breaking through Magdeburg, massacred the city of Magdeburg as if to vent their anger, killing 20,000 residents. There were only more than 20,000 people in the entire city of Magdeburg at that time. In the end, there were only 400 residents left in Magdeburg. Archbishop Ernst stood up, and everyone knew that he would support his brother. Sure enough, Archbishop Ernst said, "The Pope's decree seems to only mention that he is not allowed to join the coalition forces that attack Marin, right? We put pressure on Marin and prevent him from getting too many benefits, which does not violate the content of the Pope's decree." Although only one sentence was said, it awakened many religious princes. Yes, the Pope issued an edict just not to attack Marin. However, you can't get angry by reducing Marin's benefits through political pressure, right? There is no suitable reason. So, many religious princes, after exchanging glances, nodded and planned to help put some pressure on Marin to prevent him from overexpanding. At this time, Frederick III said again, "By the way, do you know? After this war, we may have to call Marin His Majesty the King. TSK, 11 years ago he was just a wandering knight, not even pea in our eyes, but now he is going to be the king. In the future, when we see him, we will bow to him first." The princes present were shocked, but soon understood. This time Marin is said to have defeated Denmark again. The Danish royal family has 2 crowns. Who knows, one of them might be taken away by Marin. "Can't we stop him from becoming king?" asked Duke Henry, who was acting as a childminder. "That depends on the determination of everyone present." Frederick III said this after he glanced at the whole audience. At this time, Philip, the Palatine Elector, stood up and asked, "Then, Lord Frederick, how can we intervene in your negotiations? We can't rush to the front line together to participate in your negotiations, right? This is not in accordance with the rules." Although Philip, the Elector, received Marin's money, he only promised not to send troops to participate in the siege of Marin. As an Elector, Philip was also very afraid of Marin's excessive expansion. Therefore, he was also happy to help put pressure on Marin. Frederick III thought for a moment and said, "Then I will place the negotiation in Worms. If everyone stays in Worms, they will have a reason to intervene in the negotiations. After all, this is the seat of the imperial parliament. It is reasonable to hold major negotiations here. Moreover, it is also conducive to everyone's intervention." For a time, most of the princes chose to support. After all, they were also afraid that Marin would become too powerful and threaten them. In the end, although Frederick III failed to summon the army, he received the support of most of the princes in the negotiations, including many religious princes. Chapter 509, The Decision of the Imperial Parliament. The German region is a big cake, and its quantity is limited. Some people are full, and naturally some people are not. The rise of new princes will naturally rob the interests of the old princes. Most of the princes who participated in the imperial parliament belonged to the old princes with a long history, and they were most disgusted with the newly rising princes. Because those new princes came to grab food with them. Therefore, it is not surprising that Frederick III can persuade most of the princes this time. Because everyone is really upset about the new rookie Prince Marin. This time, not only most of the secular princes, but also most of the religious princes have participated in restricting the expansion of Marin's power. Because, in the victory of Marin this time, there is an extremely sensitive thing: the royal power. Because Marin has defeated Denmark and once again captured the Danish royal family and most of the Danish nobles. Therefore, if everyone does not restrict it, Marin may grab a crown from the Danish royal family. By then, Duke Marin will become King Marin. What is the concept? This means that Marin's status will be raised to the level of being on par with the 7 electors. Even, it is half a level higher than the 6 electors. Among the 7 electors, only the status of the King of Bohemia can be equal to that of Marin, who has obtained the throne of Denmark or Norway. Once Marin becomes king, the princes present will be embarrassed. In the past, they were on an equal footing with Marin, and even had a higher status. But after Marin became king, they had to take the initiative to salute Marin. Moreover, he is also a king after all. How should Marin be positioned in the imperial parliament? Is it necessary to add an 8th elector? This is something the old electors would never want to see. At the same time, other princes are also envious and jealous, and they are not willing to let Marin really get a throne, even the throne of the poorest kingdom of Norway. You know, although the population of the Kingdom of Norway is only about 240,000, the territory it controls is very vast. In addition to the areas south of the Arctic Circle in the later Norwegian kingdom, the Kingdom of Norway also controlled the Faroe Islands, Iceland and Greenland. Although the population is sparse, in terms of the controlled area, the Kingdom of Norway is really the largest country in Europe, if the area of more than 2 million square kilometers of Greenland is included. As for the throne of the Kingdom of Denmark, not to mention that the Danes are unwilling, other European countries are not happy that Marin gets the throne of Denmark. After all, Denmark, especially Zealand, controls the throat from the Baltic Sea to the Atlantic Ocean, which is very important. The princes present are mainly secular princes. Except for Van Vladislas II of the Kingdom of Bohemia, there is no other prince who does not want to be king. After all, the king is the pinnacle of feudal lords. However, it is not so easy to be a king. You can't be independent if you want to be independent. In Europe, if you want to be a king, you must be recognized by the Holy See and other nobles. Only in this way can you be considered a king. As powerful as the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, its population, area and national strength are among the top in Europe. However, it did not get the title of a kingdom. The reason why Norway could be called a kingdom was that the Norwegians were too fierce during the Viking pirate era, and people on the European continent had to recognize it under pressure. At this time, there were not many kingdoms in the whole of Europe. In addition to the Kingdom of Bohemia in the Holy Roman Empire, there were only 10 kingdoms such as Britain, France, Scotland, Aragon, Castile, Portugal, Navarre, Naples, Hungary, Poland, Denmark, Sweden and Norway. Superpowers such as the Grand Duchy of Moscow and the Grand Duchy of Lithuania were just Grand Duchies. A crown could almost drive the German princes crazy. They couldn't get it, and they never wanted Marin to get it. This is human nature. Therefore, the result of the discussion among many princes in Worms was to strongly intervene in the negotiations between Marin and Denmark, and would rather let Marin gain more benefits in compensation and land cession than let a crown fall on Marin's head. Therefore, more than 180 powerful princes in Worms jointly signed and issued an official letter, asking Marin to come to Worms to attend the imperial conference and negotiate. Moreover, the official letter specifically requested that the captured Elector Joachim I of Brandenburg and King Hans be brought together to participate in the final negotiations. In this way, all problems can be completely solved with a joint negotiation. It was the Archbishop of Cologne again, who knew the close relationship between the Pope and Marin. The key is that he also hoped that through Marin's relationship, the Pope would promote his cousin to bishop as soon as possible. Therefore, although Archbishop Hermann IV of Cologne participated in the signature, he privately sent someone to inform Marin that the decision of this meeting would allow Marin to be prepared. In addition, Hermann IV told Marin to bring as many soldiers as possible to prevent the 2 prisoners of war, Joachim I and King Hans, who were of great value, from being rescued. Because now in Worms, the guards of the princes add up to 5,000 or 6,000 people. If Marin brings fewer soldiers and is forced by others, he may lose the 2 biggest bargaining chips in the negotiations. The secret letter from Archbishop Hermann IV of Cologne arrived in advance, because Hermann IV's men rushed to the scene quickly after several horses died along the way. However, the envoys sent by the imperial parliament did not rush so hard. Therefore, the envoys of Hermann IV arrived in less than 2 days, while the envoys of the imperial parliament arrived 4 days later. After receiving the secret letter from Hermann IV, Marin was furious about the decision of the imperial parliament. However, he had no choice. Because he also understood that he was indeed too high profile. Moreover, if he were other princes, he would also be afraid. A vassal with 40,000 strong soldiers whose combat effectiveness is no less than that of Swiss mercenaries is indeed frightening. Therefore, after the war, Marin decided to show weakness. For example, public disarmament, but actually hiding the army first, such as hiding it in Ireland or somewhere else, or something like that, so that others can breathe a sigh of relief. Indeed, if he still retains a huge military scale of 40,000 soldiers after the war, others will not be able to sleep peacefully. It is better to pull the army to the British Isles to participate in the battle for the throne. In this way, the army is hidden and the combat effectiveness of the army can be exercised through war. Of course, it is estimated that Marin will have to publicly promise something like no first use of weapons to indicate that he will never take the initiative to invade other vassal states, so that other vassal states can rest assured. Of course, if it really comes to war, this sentence is no different from putting want to start a war. Learn from the devils and deliberately provoke trouble first. Although the devils are mean, their mean tricks are easy to use. For example, deliberately saying that the soldiers are missing and going to search in other people's territory. What? Do you want to save face by not allowing the search? Well, you are the one who started it, not me who invaded you first. You have killed my soldiers, which is equivalent to declaring war on me first, so let's fight. Marin was also very unhappy about the imperial parliament's request that he take Joachim I and King Hans to Worms for negotiations. Because, at the imperial conference, these two people may be out of his control. Those princes may put pressure on him and ask him to let these two people go. However, Marin could not agree. Don't you have 5,000 or 6,000 guards in Worms? Well, I will take 10,000 elite troops there. Want to snatch people from me? Let's see if you can beat my men first. Therefore, Marin began to call on Khan and his 250 muscle sticks to accompany him. At critical moments, these muscle sticks are very suitable for group fights. If these 250 muscle sticks are released, the knights brought by those princes will be useless. A knight might be able to defeat a muscleman with martial arts, but 250 musclemen, with Khan, an invincible warrior in foot combat, leading the way, could not be stopped by anyone. Moreover, Marin was surrounded by 200 or 300 guards wearing half-body armor. With the 10,000 troops accompanying him, Marin could completely overwhelm those princes in terms of momentum. If Marin hadn't been worried that the princes would be too scared and even unite to fight him, he would have planned to bring all his troops. Bringing 10,000 people would be enough to suppress the prince's guards. However, it wouldn't cause panic among the princes. If he brought fewer people, he might be bullied by those snobbish princes. Well, I have to get up early to code again. I have to leave and continue in the evening. Chapter 510, Conquering Wittenberg, Part 1. Just 2 days after Hermann IV's intelligence was delivered, the representative of the Imperial Parliament also brought the official letter of the Imperial Parliament. At this time, Marin had passed the period of anger and calmed down completely. If it were 2 days ago, Marin might have dragged this representative out to beat him up to vent his anger. But after 2 days of calm, Marin's heart was no longer disturbed. However, in order to cooperate with the other party, Marin still pretended to be surprised and angry, and was almost beating him. And the representative of the Imperial Parliament was a baron named Lerick under the command of Henry, Duke of Brunswick-Lüneburg. As a relative country of the electorate of Saxony, the Duke of Brunswick-Lüneburg naturally stood on the side of the electorate of Saxony. In the previous war, if Frederick III had not disliked the poor combat effectiveness of the army of the Duchy of Brunswick-Lüneburg, and the gains from looting Lübeck and Hamburg were too great, Frederick III would not have been willing to share it with too many people. Therefore, the army of Lüneburg did not participate. Otherwise, perhaps the coalition would have participated in Lüneburg. As a person from the Saxon side, Baron Lerick naturally bossed around in front of Marin, trying to piss Marin off. But Marin's anger had long dissipated, so although he looked angry, he was just pretending. If he was really angry, Lerick might have his legs broken by Marin. However, Marin was surprised to find that Lerick was accompanied by someone from Frederick III, the Elector of Saxony. Of course, this was not discovered by Marin himself, but by the two suspected Frederick III's entourage who were in the toilet, and their conversation was accidentally heard by Marin's men. According to the guard who happened to be in the toilet and overheard the other party's conversation, the two were Saxon officials who came with Baron Lerick, and they wanted to take the opportunity to see if they could pass the good news brought by the Imperial Parliament back to the city of Wittenberg so that John could rest assured. Reassure John. Humph. Marin sneered. The negotiations haven't started yet, and the war hasn't ended yet. If you reassure John at this time, aren't you letting John relax his guard? Is Frederick III so stupid? Marin didn't expect that. In fact, Frederick III sent these two people back just to observe the situation of the battle in Wittenberg, and did not let them report what happened in Worms to John, who stayed behind. In fact, the two should have followed Baron Lerick to convey the decision of the Imperial Parliament, and then quickly returned to Worms to report the situation to Frederick III. But the problem is that these two idiots have their own selfishness. You know, Frederick III is not married and has no offspring. In the future, the electorate of Saxony will definitely be inherited by John. So, in the eyes of these two idiots, John is the crown prince and the future master. Therefore, it is also very important to please John in the eyes of these two idiots. Now, Baron Lerick, holding the official letter of the imperial parliament, puts pressure on Marin. In the eyes of these two people, Marin should not have the courage to resist the pressure jointly exerted by more than 180 German princes. Therefore, they are a little impatient to enter Wittenberg to announce the good news to John, in order to win John's appreciation and lay the foundation for their future career. After learning about the ideas revealed by the two idiots when they were squatting in the toilet, Marin suddenly had an idea and decided to take advantage of the situation. For this reason, Marin deliberately arranged a bad accommodation for Baron Lerick and others. Then, he told them in a very apologetic tone, "There are many inconveniences during the march, please forgive me." The accommodation arranged by Marin for them was more than bad. 3 people squeezed into a tent, and the tent was not cleaned up yet. It was full of the stinky feet of the soldiers who originally lived in it. This also caused Lerick and the 2 Saxon attendants to not sleep well in the middle of the night. While expressing his deep apologies, Marin also gave the 3 people an idea: why don't you go to Wittenberg to rest? After all, Wittenberg is a big city, and the accommodation conditions inside must be much better than those in the barracks. Sure enough, the 2 idiots took the bait. They originally wanted to go into the city to pass on the news to John and please John, the future elector. So, at the instigation of the 2 of them, Baron Lerick also agreed to enter Wittenberg to rest. In order to allow the 3 to enter Wittenberg with peace of mind, Marin ordered to stop the exploratory attack for several days, and also withdrew the siege troops away from the city gate, so as to facilitate the 3 people and their followers to enter the city. But the general in charge of defending the city was very cautious and did not open the city gate to welcome the 3 people into the city. Because they were afraid that Marin would take the opportunity to send cavalry into the city. In fact, Marin did have this plan. Therefore, the 3 people and their guards entered the city in a hanging basket. After seeing Baron Lerick and the 2 stupid attendants enter the city, although Marin was a little regretful, because he failed to take the opportunity to send troops into the city, he quickly put his mood back and showed a weird smile of success. Why was Marin so happy? The reason is that since the 2 idiots wanted to please John so much, they would definitely tell John the good news that the imperial parliament supported Frederick III to put pressure on Marin. If it was normal, it would be nothing to tell John this news. But now it's wartime. Telling John such good news is going to be a big deal. What big deal? It will make John relax his vigilance. Originally, John was responsible for staying in Wittenberg, and he was still very cautious, fearing that Wittenberg would be breached, so the defense was in place, and even many people were sent to patrol the city in the middle of the night. However, after listening to the report of the 2 idiots, he would inevitably be very happy. In addition, Marin suspended the tentative attack on Wittenberg at this time and stopped the attack completely. In this way, John would have an illusion that Marin gave up the attack on Wittenberg under the pressure of the imperial parliament. In this way, the opponent's vigilance would decrease. At that time, Marin's opportunity would come. On the 3rd day, Baron Lerick, who had rested enough, sat in a hanging basket down the city head in a refreshed state, came to Marin's camp, and urged Marin to hurry to Worms for negotiations. However, Marin had a reason to delay. Marin said that the captured Elector Joachim I of Brandenburg and King Hans of Denmark were both staying in Schleswig, the capital of the Duchy of Schleswig. The official letter required Marin to bring these 2 important figures to Worms to participate in the negotiations. Therefore, Marin needed time to send someone to pick up the 2 people. When the 2 arrived, Marin would go to Worms in person to participate in the negotiations. In addition, Marin also evacuated his troops from under the walls of Wittenberg and camped a few kilometers away from Wittenberg to reassure the defenders in Wittenberg. At the same time, Marin repeatedly expressed to the special envoy Baron Lerick that he supported the decision of the imperial parliament and was willing to make peace with Saxony and Brandenburg. Everything seemed so harmonious, as if he was just waiting for the arrival of 2 heavyweight prisoners of war, Joachim I and King Hans of Denmark. In order to welcome these 2 important figures, Marin sent 2,000 cavalry to escort them along the way.